Welcome back to the Agentic Insider. I'm your host, Philip Swan. In this show, we explore cutting-edge ideas and trends in AI and data, as well as hear from other industry thought leaders in the AI space. This podcast is brought to you by Iridius AI, committed to safe and responsible AI innovation. Let's dig in. Welcome to this week's edition of the Agentic Insider. Joining me and Alistair this week is an amazing entrepreneur who is passionate about AI and AI consulting. She writes and publishes a daily newsletter on AI insights built for Fortune 500 executives. She is the founding member of Entreprenista, a community created to help founders connect with each other. And she is an AI systems integration and deployment consultant for Profesh and the founder of Enterprise AI Solutions. Kat Valverde, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So Kat, we start off every episode with this question. You are no exception. What future are you solving for, Kat?
Yes, a future where, very simply put, AI is serving people as well as profit. Um, Scaling is important, profits are important. That's what business is. But, finding a way that it can also be ethically and equitably implemented is the name of the game for everything that we do.
Awesome.
And so, just riffing off that a little bit. I mean, you're big into ethical AI, and I know when we met before we talked about this. But there's a reason going back to childhood around this. So, if you're open to sharing it, I think it's really great to give the listeners a foundation into where this ethical AI sort of is coming from and driving you.
Yes, happy to. Good story. I was actually the daughter, one of four children, of one of the original OG telemarketing scam artists of the late 80s and early 90s. My father, a very complicated onion of a person, spent many years creating what we all now kind of joke about, calling elderly people and selling them vitamins that are aspirin and promising them cruises and trips to Vegas, pie in the sky items, and making a ton of money doing that. So that is my foundation. Interestingly, he, when I say he was one of the first, he truly was a pioneer in that he was traveling around the country, training phone centers on scripts and best practices, which I should put in quotes, and how to ironically be super successful at this really shady, lucrative but shady game that, is still around in many different forms. So, that being the foundation, I didn't actually quite know it had such an impact on me as a professional and as an entrepreneur until I got into the entrepreneur game. It's very easy to take the easy ways out, especially if that's commonplace. And especially when you're trying to figure out how to pay your bills while you're building a business. And so I've found, I don't know if appreciation is the right word, maybe a bit more understanding about the things that he did and why he did them, and also why I do not want to do those things. So that's my story in a nutshell.
It's a really compelling story. I mean, that must have been fun doing show and tell at school. What does your dad do for a living at show and tell? And at elementary school, that must have been a fun experience. But I think one of the things that I've really admired about you as I've gotten to learn about you is how much you think strategically as well as pragmatically around around how you actually deploy AI for scale. So you've developed something you call strategy to scale. Can you break that down and what makes this different from other enterprise AI approaches, and why so many companies struggle with moving beyond pilot programs into production?
Sure. I mean, gosh, there's so many reasons I'm finding this is proof that we're still in the Wild West when it comes to AI. And one of the most interesting things that I learned really quickly from pivoting from SMB into enterprise is that enterprise leaders are not exempt from the overwhelm of this fast-paced world that we live in AI. And they're certainly not exempt from the fear of one bad decision costing time and money, right? And so what we've done is the strategy to scale being one way is we've built resources to try to help them understand how to get buy-in from top down and bottom up when it comes to the fear of AI, of course, how to build your roadmaps around implementation if and when you do get buy-in at the highest levels, and how to kind of from A to Z build a plan that will bring your people along with you for a very long-term success. And I say all of that because the interesting thing we're seeing is everyone's spending money on AI. I read a stat recently that was something like 1/5 of tech spend per
It's
company.
crazy.
It's crazy. But if you break that down, it's something like half of that is short term, and 20 to 30% of enterprise leaders are thinking long term when it comes to AI. And so the amount of time and the amount of money that we are just throwing out the window is not going to be able to continue happening for long, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what it really comes down to is also picking the right AI use case we're finding, right? And then where does safety and compliance and regulatory all fit into all of this equation, into the calculus before you hit into deployment? What are you seeing companies doing today in that regard?
Yes. So good news for AI businesses that catch on to this. I would say those who are building the most trust and getting a quick yes, which that's a relative term. It certainly doesn't happen super, super fast at the enterprise sales cycle. But, those that are standing apart are already coming to the table, including security, compliance, coming with those answers proactively in the same way that they would in their pitch decks talk about ROI, right? Because these are the questions that we aren't always asking at the enterprise level proactively. And it's oh crap moment when
Yeah.
we've already spent the money and the time building a pilot and, getting halfway through implementation before we realize, oh, what about all of our clients' data? Oh, what are we building this on top of? Where is our data going? Like, do we own this?
That's going to leave a really nasty taste in the C-suites and the board's mouth that have just spent millions and millions of dollars on something that never hit production.
Yes. And the way that it trickles downstream is really fascinating. I find on the one hand, the most obvious hand, you have these C-suite leaders that are fearful to propose AI at all, right? Is this am I going to get credit for this? Or, if it goes downhill, am I the one that's out the door? And but you draw a line from that to how we're selling to enterprises, and it's changing the entire game. So on the one hand, we're working with enterprise leaders, but on the other hand, we're working with AI businesses to try to help them understand that piece of it. Like, hey, these guys are fearful in a way that you haven't experienced before, and they're probably not telling you the whole story. You can do tons of research, you can figure out what's going on with their IPOs and what pain points they probably have. But when it comes to speaking one-on-one and trying to make your pitch, you don't always have the whole story. And a large piece of that story is, do I want to put my name on this? Do I want to endorse this? If I can get buy-in at all, right?
Absolutely. And I think, as organizations are trying to assess where are they going with AI, the next question is, everyone is jumping up and down saying, don't worry about AI. What you really want now is agents. And after all, this podcast is the Agentic Insider. And so we're at the point now where companies are struggling to find a use case, struggling to get past a pilot, struggling to see any ROI from so many of the things that they have tried, and there's a limit to how far they'll go. And now everyone is jumping up and down saying, you know what's missing in your life is agents. You need a lot more of that. And I think it becomes very difficult for enterprises to be able to get through the chatter, cut through the noise, and figure out, okay, what should I do longer term? Okay, and how do I capitalize on new developments when these developments appear to be happening hourly?
Yes. And it's also, I always laugh when, the conversation is, well, everybody is doing this now, so we need to jump on. Like, that's the new thing.
Sure. I mean, everyone's doing cloud. So, this is like 15 years ago. Everyone's doing cloud. I need some of that cloud. Why do you need cloud? Because everyone else is using cloud.
Right.
So I need cloud too.
Yes. And it's the small and the big things. Oh, everyone's doing layoffs. So the economy must be on a downtrend. I guess we need to do layoffs. And then all of a sudden everybody's laid off and we don't know why. It's like we have lost the plot in the big and the small things. And especially when it comes to AI and we are seeing something new every single day, it's one, do I really need this? Or is this now a solution to a problem I probably don't even have? And so these are the questions that seem kind of obvious when we're talking conversationally about them, but when you're sitting in a boardroom with, everybody bringing their stakes to the table, that's not always the case. It's very easy to lose the plot in that way, especially if you are a publicly traded company, for example, and you have very hefty goals. And so it can get really messy really quickly.
So just double click a little bit more into what you're talking about with the layoffs. I mean, CFOs are driving a hard bargain right now, a really hard bargain, because they're focused on metrics like revenue per employee. And when you've got companies investing billions, literally billions, in infrastructure, the money doesn't get printed out of thin air. It's got to come from somewhere. And unless you're a nonprofit, you still have to make a profit to stay in business. And so there is that other side of the sword there, right? What are you seeing with the enterprises that you're working with? I mean, we saw that this will hint when we actually recorded this episode, because just this morning, Microsoft announced 9,000 people being laid off. It's primarily the sales and marketing organization that has been hit particularly hard. And that puts it to over, to 15,000 people this year that Microsoft has laid off, or more, in fact, if you think some back in January. And so are you seeing some, CFOs driving the hard bargain in the other companies that you're working with?
Yes and no. I will throw you an example, not one of our clients, but a cautionary tale that we use for almost all of our clients is Klarna. So, 2022, they laid off, I think it was 700 or 800 people, and the CEO was very proud, not necessarily of the layoffs, of course, but of the AI implementations that they knew were going to make a huge difference. And it was end of 2024 when their CSAT was low, their NPS scores low. They're losing clients, they're not bringing on new ones. And so with direct feedback that it was their chatbots, their automations were not working properly. And so they had to scramble to hire people back. And so I say that to say driving those hard bargains really depends on what your short and your long-term goals are. And, this all ties into the ethical implementation and making sure that it's equitable for everybody and that we all have a responsibility to start thinking about those long terms, and what that means for all of us.
I agree, and I mean, in some ways, there's a parallel between that and the problems that Duolingo is going through right now. I mean, Duolingo, decided to get rid of a lot of the human element of people reviewing each other's language content, okay, and answers, and now replace them with AI, and everyone had a revolt. And suddenly it became a company that was being ridiculed for its decision to sort of get rid of the human element and replace it to some extent with AI. And then at that point, you end up saying, well, yes, you could understand why AI could be used to augment it. But this, one of the principles that the responsible AI principles that we have at Iridius is human AI collaboration. Part of the sort of pillar around AI needs to be good for people and good for the planet. And there's a very big difference between collaborating and augmenting with AI than just replacing people. And your entire raison d'etre for is to have the human element, replacing it with AI, and people revolted. So I think there's almost a parallel there in some ways towards understanding what your value proposition is and where the human element really is in all of this.
It's so true. That's such a good example and a fun thought experiment. If you really draw it out with Duolingo, it's like, okay, so let's say they didn't realize there was a problem or didn't care enough, right? That the trade-off wasn't sufficient enough for them. And we drag this out, I don't know, 50 years maybe. And now we're all speaking a slightly off language. So, you really can't underestimate, if we don't pay attention to what's going on, what implications this will have for the world, in ways that we haven't even thought of. Language, for example, being a really big one. And I would say, too, the real opportunity that applies to, I've never had a client that this wouldn't apply to, is upskilling your workers. This is one of the main tenets on all of the roadmaps that we help prepare, is that, listen, these agencies, maybe they work with you forever, and great if they do, but things happen and AI is crazy and this world is crazy, and maybe they go out of business. What do? You've laid off all of your devs because they didn't know the tech and they weren't AI focused. When you had that opportunity with that onboarding to build that into your relationship with your vendor, to say, okay, now we need to make a step in this roadmap be, how do we train and who do we train that we already have, so that if something happens, we're all right.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to jump in, Philip. And I think one of the skills, that needs to be on every roadmap around this is not only how do you help augment yourself to really be able to do things better, but also discernment. Because there is a lot of blind trust that is being done right now, where people will happily just, ask a question and then post the answer without even thinking about it on LinkedIn, create marketing copy without really thinking about it. And this level of discernment and the ability to have a collaborative conversation with AI, okay, where you're able to apply some level of intellectual rigor and horsepower to what's coming back, and then using that to riff and refine, rather than just taking it with a face value and without even thinking about it. And I think that's a skill that really has to come to the fore here. As these tools can provide information so quickly, you need to make sure that you're validating that the information it's producing, okay, is not only correct and not hallucinated, but also is really what you're looking for. And I think that sort of working with AI collaboratively is such a huge skill that has to be on that roadmap.
Definitely. And I think, it's so interesting. I think it was just today, or maybe it was yesterday, that Sam Altman came out and said, yes, we know hallucinations happen. Yes, AI slop is a real thing, but I don't know what to do about it. There's no solution. And it's like, oh, okay, well, great. This is what it is.
Yep.
It really will be a skill.
Well, some of this hallucination is good. At the moment, Philip and I and some of the other team are just finalizing 4 provisional patents. And those patents are us hallucinating new ideas. We're inventing things that didn't exist before. That's the whole point about patents. So not all hallucination is bad. You just want, just the question is, what sort of hallucination are you willing to tolerate, and under what circumstances for this as well? And I think that's the nuance that the people also struggle with.
And that's where I was going to go, right? I was going to go into those patterns, because what Alistair and I were starting to work on over the last weekend, because typical startup, we're working 7 days a week, right? We don't take vacations, and it's crazy, right? So we're taking these really, really complex documents, and they're very complex. And how do you turn those into language that people will understand? So of course, I started doing my research and stuff like that, putting things into a little bit, not the whole pads, but a little bits of it into, how do I explain this in layperson's terms and everything else. I produced this whole big document, and I thought, this looks really good. I read it. I'm going like, this makes sense to me. And Alistair goes to me, this is 100% correct, and it's also 100% wrong.
Yeah.
So,
Basically what it had done is it had taken it's as if it had basically taken all the principles of everything inside these and summarized it and then said this stuff relates to patent one, this stuff relates to patent two, this stuff relates to patent three. What it said was right, but its relationship back to the actual patents was completely wrong. So as long as you crossed out the headings for patent one, patent two, patent three, and patent four, everything it said was right at a general term, but it wasn't a summary of one, a summary of two, and a summary. And it is so funny. I mean, it gets it right, but it gets it wrong. That level of being able to have a validation sort of check through this, it's not easy. I mean, and at agents. We had, we're talking to people the other day, and we're going to get, they're looking at, 15 million bank accounts, probably 3 agents per 45 million agents, to be able to monitor what's going on with the accounts and things like that. The number of these agents going off and doing different things, okay, only is going to exacerbate these problems, very, very quickly.
Yes. It's an interesting process to think about accountability and responsibility and where it lands. And I think this is really unique to this moment because, obviously we have these large enterprises. We're talking about layoffs and upskilling and, what do we do to keep the world going? But there is also an individual responsibility that we all have to upskill ourselves, right? And I think this is the unique piece to say, my husband is an MRI tech. He's in a trade essentially. He'll probably be fine, but probably doesn't really work in these times. Like you have a responsibility as well to figure out what's happening and what this tech is, and then hallucinate some things yourself. To your point, Philip, start thinking about how you could be using it, and that also then would apply to the what is it? I forget who put this out, but about the AI unicorns. Like we're seeing so many more of them with like 1 or 2 employees. Like in a funny way, it on the other hand, it democratizes everything.
Yep.
yeah, well, like Sam Altman, he forecasted last year that the first $1 billion in revenue company with a single employee will be a thing within 5 years, and I personally agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that will happen.
Yeah, the $1 billion solopreneur is definitely going to be here. What's funny is, I mean, there are so many things posting at the moment on Instagram. Okay, it's just coming out that it's this particular person is living the high life, is going out and and taking photographs on various vacations and posting about what they're doing, and has been doing it for a year, completely made up, not real. Okay, the person in it is basically is an avatar that has been created and modeled to be able to be put into various locations. So the entire thing is not real. And then the question is, okay, well, they're getting an awful lot of likes and comments. So how many of those likes and comments are from real humans? Okay, and the sort of things it's the bots liking the bots, generating the bots, and we're at that point where there's a huge echo chamber going on for some of this sort of thing as well.
But is it an echo chamber for the bots?
Exactly. Yes, it's probably a space for us somewhere. The question is where. That's it.
Oh, crazy. And in fact, we did a story a few months back on AI influencers, and it was exactly that. But they were being paid a ton of money, whoever their
Oh, sure.
handler, I guess. I don't know what you would call whoever's running these avatars, but yeah, it's wild and a smart business, to be fair.
It is. So moving gears just a little bit, I'd love to get into one of your pet topics about AI ROI, and I know that's one of your pet things that you love to talk about, as we do, right? Because for us, we think always in terms of outcomes. What is the outcome to the business? It's how we enter every meeting. It's how we enter every document. It's how we enter into every customer conversation. It's like, what's the outcome? And so you've been really critical about AI ROI, which you are right to be critical. What do you see some of the biggest mistakes that companies are making, and how should they be really evaluating their AI investments, Kat?
That's such a good question. It certainly depends on the industry. I'll take marketing, for example. Jetty just did a really lovely report. It was actually focused on sustainability and how the world is still really looking for brands that focus on that. But they touched on what's resonating with them. And how it changes from country to country, how it changes from generation to generation. It obviously focused on CMO audience in this case. And the takeaway there is your KPIs are not going to be the KPIs of yesterday, of last year. And it's requiring of enterprises to start thinking a bit more like entrepreneurs and think, okay, what is the problem? As we've said, make sure you know what you're trying to solve for. Two, how can I creatively solve for this? But three, what is the definition of what solved is? This isn't a problem anymore, or is it revenue generating? And if so, how much? What's that forecasting look like? But in this case with the marketing, for example, it's the problem is we historically have used stock photos and they've been fine. That's easy peasy. We have the budget for it. But that is not resonating anymore. We're seeing that across generations, they want to see something that's real, which is quite ironic because we can generate almost anything now on Midjourney that maybe is real, maybe isn't. But they want something authentic and they want something genuine. And so, how do you measure that? Probably in, how many clicks am I getting on something that's a traditional stock photo versus, maybe something that's AI generated, but has a different voice and a different message. And I think that's a really good example because these sorts of things will keep changing in tangible and intangible ways. And we have to find a way to creatively measure things that traditionally maybe we haven't thought about. Maybe we're A/B testing things we haven't A/B tested before. But two, figuring out how do we even measure that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really focus on personally, they're not on lagging indicators, but leading indicators. Now you go like, okay, what's the difference? Well, everybody loves to track revenue because it's a real tangible number. But guess what? It's a lagging indicator. You've already hit that number. What's going to get me to the next jump, right? What are those leading indicators? And really identify them, because I could spew out a list for you right here and for the audience right here, but they're going to be different for every company. You're going to be general things. But across the company, I talk in terms of customer centricity, right? And that's not just about sales and marketing being united and having the same message being delivered by marketing as by your AEs and everybody else in the organization. That is absolutely critical. Make no mistake about that. But it is also really important that the entire team, from operations to product to engineering to sales and marketing, that everybody's focused, in my opinion, on customer success. And that's not your CSAT number. That is a number. It's a good number to know that you're over 85%, fantastic. But the real ones I look at are things like net revenue retention or gross revenue retention. I look at both of those as key indicators of customer satisfaction, of customer retention, I should say, not just satisfaction, because you want to identify problems early. It's like any problem. You kick the can down the road, the problem is like a snowball. It just gets bigger, right, as you go down there. So when you think about this and driving this, what are some of the KPIs that you're seeing are being successfully deployed in enterprise to measure success?
Yes, I mean, I totally agree with everything that you just said. In fact, so when we agree to take on an AI vendor to help build their go-to-market, for example, the first thing we dig into is, are you legit? Like, are you doing the thing
Yeah.
that you say you're doing? Which sounds funny, but it's AI.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
What was the agent company that just went under because they were actually the agents were 700 people based offshore, okay, doing all of the work. Like the Amazon, the Amazon just walk out and it scans all of your goods as you take them off the shelf. The only reason it worked with the cameras is because it was an army of humans that were actually writing everything down and logging it as it went. There wasn't any AI really involved.
Exactly. Yep. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, do you have the infrastructure to support an enterprise client? Or, we have some that prefer to focus on mid-market, but even still, do you have that infrastructure? And the third is, how satisfied are your customers? We dig into exactly everything you said to say, we are not putting you anywhere near a pitch room with an enterprise client of ours if you are not focused on customer success. and especially retention. It'll tell you everything, even in the early days where you're pre-revenue, right? So there's that. But I would say on the enterprise side, if we're doing pilots, I advise vendors in their pitch to come with questions, to have an idea of what they're looking for when they're talking ROI, have an idea of revenue, or maybe I was going to say to a lesser extent, but I think they're probably even now, time savings, efficiency building, quotes, but come with questions. And especially when it comes to, abandon rates of prior pilots, at what point did you realize this wasn't worth the time and the money? What happened? And then, be ready off the cuff to say how you can address that. And again, it's some creative kind of on your feet working to say, okay, how do we increase adoption? But if I had to pick one, that's what it would be, is how do I get to the finish line? What does that look like?
So just one last thing on what we do internally is like we measure time to value. This is
Exactly.
everything. It's all we measure, quite honestly. Because if we can get time to value done, all the rest happens because everybody's happy. It's like, oh my gosh, I was able to do this in a day where it would have taken me 6 or 9 months before, and that's literally what
Yes.
we're doing here. And so it's AI, if it's implemented correct, should be giving superpowers to the person who's using it.
Solving a problem that they're constantly frustrated by. It's easy to say this is something really sexy, like we're so excited about it, everyone's doing it, or the reverse, we're the first ones to do this. Great, but is it solving something where you'll think, oh, thank God this isn't a problem anymore, right?
And that's the hype, right? So the hype's always, it's like the latter days of SaaS, because I think SaaS is dying, quite honestly, and in my own personal opinion. And we're going to see somewhat of a bloodbath in the SaaS community of companies that have still yet to reach a profit. They're in Series F, Gs, and beyond. Who's going to continue investing in that? And they don't have an AI story, right? ChatGPT is my AI story. Okay, good luck with that. It's but it's back to that, to that disruption that we can deliver by giving you a superpower, whether it's you, Cat Valverde, or me, Philip Swan, and what I'm looking for superpowers. I mean, what is my superpower? My superpower is talking to customers, quite literally, because I understand our product so well because I helped Alistair and I designed it. And but more importantly, I have the ability to get into the customer's head and understand their pain point. And it's more than a pain point. I don't go after pain points. I go after migraines. Because when we've all had each of us in this episode has had a migraine or a really bad headache that we will just go, I will pay anything to get rid of this thing, right? And that's the same thing in business. Find the migraine. So what migraines are you finding with your customers?
So what's really interesting, we use the closing the gap, the time to value gap, as one of our cornerstones. But in reality, what we're doing is the AI vetting gap is really what we're solving for. And we're solving for that on two sides. On the one side, it's the enterprises. They might have the money and they might have a little bit of time, but the same as we said with, running pilots, you get to a point where you realize, okay, it's not even a gap anymore. Like, we just can't keep doing this. Or we realized we have a security concern, so we've got to abandon. And so we help them with that by saying, okay, let's, one, put a roadmap together of what you're really looking for in a perfect world. But two, hey, great news. We have 5 vendors that we've already vetted for all of your needs and for all of our requirements for even working with us. So we can close the 90-day at minimum cycle here. Congratulations. But two, that really is the main pain point on the AI vendor side as well, because the time it takes even to get into the room with the right person before you can even start that sales cycle is, I mean, you couldn't even put a limit on it. And it's a little bit luck as well. And so we're helping close that as the biggest pain point on both sides, and especially helping these businesses build and earn trust with the enterprises.
I think this is such a huge thing because, I mean, it's extremely difficult for almost every organization to assess AI vendors in a rigorous way because it is so new. It's easy for them to do it from a compliance perspective. Do you meet 27001? Do you have standards around asset management? That's a standard procurement series of questions around the type of company you are and your financial data and things. But actually being able to assess, how do you believe in ethical AI? Does it align with our ethical AI, assuming that we have ethical AI and that sort of thing as a company? And then what sort of areas that the AI is offering, and how does that fit? Because if I'm now going to 6 or 7 different vendors, okay, because there are so many out there, and then the question is, how much overlap is there between vendor 7 and vendor 3? And what if they both do something pretty well? Which one do I choose? So the complexity can go up significantly. And not only that, the AI is changing regularly. So the assessment that you do today may not be valid in 3, 6, 9 months. So the question is, where are they going with their AI? Okay, if they can give you a 3-year roadmap, I'll be shocked, because OpenAI can't. And things like that right now. So then the question is, okay, how do you keep on top of continuing to assess the AI, suppliers that you have and the work that's been done in light of the changes in the market?
It's so true. And really, the crux of all of it is you could have year after year the best tech in the room, and you still aren't going to land those companies if you haven't
Yep,
built trust with them, if you
absolutely.
haven't like put forth a differentiator in some way outside of, well, we have the best tech. Like, well, congratulations for how much longer, and I don't know if I trust you to take this on, or I can't put my name on it because this doesn't work. I might lose my job. So how much do I actually trust this?
One of the things, Kat, that I know that you provide out is this weekly Wednesday webinar and your newsletter, both of which I understand are provided for free to. So my question is, you've obviously started doing this because you wanted to be able to help, people cut through the noise, the chatter, and be able to get some real nuggets of wisdom here. But what is it that you're sort of offering? What sort of content is it? What audience are you targeting, and why are you doing this?
Yes. Well, twofold. I would say first, we are doing this weekly because things are changing so quickly, and we are speaking with these enterprise leaders every day about very micro things. Which story here resonated with you and why, or what piece of this of our A/B test, why did you pick A? So, we get really, really micro, and then we have a wealth of data to be able to share with these AI businesses, which they aren't getting anywhere else, right? Like they're just sharing this with us privately. And so we're able to, early on, before a trend actually comes out, before we're seeing transitions into different specialties, before we're seeing enterprises shift gears, we are getting inklings of that. And so on these weekly webinars, we are, the first bit talking about headlines because they're fun to talk about, talking about AI gossip essentially, and our take on it, sharing the data that's topical that we've been learning about, and then sharing with them how that works with our business and what we can provide if that's something that they're looking for. And the audiences for those would be, CMOs, CROs, any leaders of AI businesses, whether that's software or services or product, that are really looking to increase their scalability and get into enterprise rooms. I say that with an asterisk to say, don't raise your hand if you're not ready. You both know that it's a different game being an enterprise, but that's who we're going for.
That's great. Well, we're going to start winding down here, and we're going to wind down with some rapid fire questions. So first thing that comes
Oh
into your
gosh.
mind,
Okay.
Kat, okay? All right. If you could change one thing, just one thing about how the business world approaches AI implementation, what would it be?
Ooh, upskill instead of layoffs for a 4-day work week.
Ooh, I love that. That's probably the best answer I've heard so far.
That could open up a whole separate discussion about Workplace 5.0. Okay, but we won't go there. We don't have time to do that. That's another episode. You're coming back on for
Deal.
another episode, and we're going to talk about that. Second question. What's the most counterintuitive piece of advice you could give to a Fortune 500 executive about AI strategy?
Quarterly goals. You should not be looking quarterly. It doesn't work. It's good to check in, but I would not hold yourself accountable to meeting them that quickly and that frequently. You need a higher level view.
Great. I'm moving the last two questions, get a little bit more personal. What's next for Cat Valverde and Enterprise AI Solutions that your audience should be expected to know about?
We have a lot of really exciting things. I would say we do have a new the State of AI report coming out in Q3 that we're really, really excited about. So make sure to subscribe to our newsletter so that you get that. We have partnered with another consulting firm that we love dearly and have been doing a ton of outreach to the Big Four, to a ton of executives. And so we're really, really excited to see what the data tells us about the state of AI.
And second to last question, how do people reach you?
Yes. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Cat Valverde. I am in there all the time, so please do reach out. You can subscribe at enterpriseaisolutions.io. And you can reach us at enterpriseai.events for our webinars.
Awesome. And the last question, I promise, Kat, what do you like to do personally for fun?
I mean, you just heard my dog. I have two very large dogs that my husband and I love to hang out with. We are big travelers, and I'm also very crafty. So my office, I've fully outgrown it with all of my crafts.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Cat Valverde, thank you so much for being an amazing guest. We're going to have you back on. We promise.
Great. I can't wait. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap on this week's episode of the Agentic Insider. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more, please visit agenticinsider.show. To learn more about Iridius, visit iridius.ai. We'll see you next time.